Soya, his friends, and the forces of Nebula make their way to the dark side of the moon to have one final battle with the big destructive dragon. The Planet With anime series has done in 11 episodes what other long-running anime series could only hope to accomplish. This is a perfect package kind of anime series, and honestly, even though it's going to end at 12 episodes, it told a perfectly concise story, and a story that was filled with a surprising amount of heart considering it's basically about robots fighting a giant dragon. The entire theme of this series really comes to a head in this episode right here. The ultimate theme of the series is about the power of forgiveness. It's easy to get angry, it's easy to want to get revenge on someone. It takes a lot of work to actually forgive somebody for something that they've done, and that's basically what this entire final arc is going to be. Don't worry, it still looks like we're going to be getting a lot of amazing action, but ultimately it looks like the final villain is going to be taken down by the power of friendship, with a combination of giant psychic armor and all types of crazy mecha goodness. So let's go ahead and jump into this episode of Planet With, which is the beginning of the time skip portion of the series, which is going to consist of the final 2 episodes of the series, and I think that's very appropriate. It actually takes place 5 years later, and it looks like humanity is actually working a little closer with Nebula, with some of them actually being brought into their force. Not only are all the original members of Grand Paladin there, but even Nozomi, of all people, has actually started to learn under them, and apparently is a pretty powerful psychic. This is actually really good because 1, she gets to be relevant towards the end, and 2, we get to see that throughout this time, her relationship with Soya has grown quite a bit to the point where it's pretty obvious that the two have very strong feelings for one another. It's also worth noting that she actually has the ability to see the people of Paradise, in particular the one that looks just like Soya's brother. She's actually able to psychically link with him in order to pull that off, and that alone makes her a pretty special individual since the other members of Nebula cannot even see this guy in the first place. Also, the people of Paradise are pretty important in this episode, especially the one that we actually see throughout the entire series, as we get to learn that they actually have a strong connection to the dragon. The dragon itself apparently was originally a person who was a people of Paradise, and instead of allowing themselves to evolve to the point of becoming just a pure, non-physical being, it actually got corrupted and slowly but surely started to accumulate its photon god armor and eventually transformed into the massive dragon that we see now. And the main reason that the people of Paradise are so interested in this, in particular the main one here, is because the dragon itself is actually his brother. Yes, there's actually another brother connection in the series, and I love how that parallels with Soya's story and the fact that he takes the form of his brother as well. I don't know what it is, but wow, that was just so well thought out. What I especially love about it, too, is that you get to learn the true name of the dragon, which I will attempt to pronounce for you guys. I believe it is Azra Barakara, which already alone, just saying that out loud, just sounds wrong. But it's interesting to know that this dragon actually had its origins with the people of Paradise, and ultimately the people who eventually formed Nebula. And I love that we get to see more of Nebula in this episode and the people who actually comprise of their race. They're not just a bunch of anthropomorphic animal people, there's a bunch of weird-looking monsters and aliens and weird rat people, one of which Nezia seems to be forming a loving relationship with, which is by itself freaking hilarious. Speaking of hilarious, I do love the fact that their brand new ship is basically based on a Maneki Neko, which is like one of those golden cats that you actually end up seeing in like a Chinese restaurant. I don't know, it's just a funny image, and it goes in line with a lot of the other spaceships that they've actually used in the show. The image of watching this thing flying through space with the Generalissimo and the Sensei Giant robots is such a weird and surreal image, but also at the same time, kind of badass. At its core, this entire episode is a build-up to the final confrontation with the dragons, with all of the Nebula forces acting as sort of like support, while everybody in Grand Paladin goes to fight against the dragon itself. It is worth mentioning that we do learn that the armor that they're using actually did come from the dragon, and that's very obvious. There was a lot of clues to that in the past, with the fact that when Takashi was actually using that, little by little the armor would slowly start to transform and start to look a lot like the dragon that we actually see currently here. Also, I thought it was kind of weird that they just sort of, like, ended up killing his father. Like, they didn't, like, kill him, but, like, he died during the time skip period, and he died in the most anticlimactic way possible. The dude choked on some mochi. I don't know, maybe it's kind of appropriate for the goofy old man, but I was kind of hoping that we get to see him return somehow in the final battle, even though he was very old. Ultimately, the big plan to take down this dragon is to not only subjugate it and hit it with a lot of really cool, powerful attacks, but also to use the power of friendship to forgive it. Basically, it's all up to Soya here. He's going to be the one who's fully responsible for basically bringing this dragon out of its crazy mad funk. He's going to have to forgive it for the death of all of his people, for the death of his brother. Again, going with the theme of forgiveness, the power of it overall. It's kind of cheesy and schmaltzy, but honestly, I think it works really well with this series, and they've done a great job of, like, sort of making that the central focus. If you go back and watch the entire series, it's pretty much dominated throughout the entire show, but it's never felt preachy, and I think that's why I've loved it so much. At the end of the episode, the battle begins, with Grand Paladin fighting against the dragon, who's spewing its mini dragons all over the place. Grand Paladin has a great sequence where they all get to take them down, and I love that we actually get to see Nezia in action a little bit. We actually didn't get to see any of him barely in the series at all, so to finally see him attacking and utilizing some electrical-styled attacks was honestly very welcome. All of Grand Paladin was really great to see in this episode. The fact that they've all gone through a time skip and they look slightly different, but they're mostly the same characters. Although I have to admit that Haru and Mew being like classmates of Soya is really funny. They went to the same college apparently together, and their relationship comes across as a little unstable in the fact that they actually tried to do judo with him, but it just resulted in them kicking his ass all the time, which makes him incredibly nervous and kind of awkward to actually be around them. But the overall vibe of that scene where they sort of torture him a little bit also just, I don't know what it is, but that whole scene just makes me uncomfortable. The episode ends with Sensei and Generalissimo using their signature hammer attacks to punch the dragon directly into the moon, promising us that the final episode is going to be all sorts of epic. What's the rundown on this episode of Planet With? Guys, this show really has impressed me with what it's been able to pull off in this short amount of time. Like I said, a lot of the times with these big anime series, these giant spectacle type of series, it takes a long time to get to these sort of like end game events, whether it be just a standard 26 episode season or a couple hundred or 1,000 episodes like the frickin' One Piece anime series. Here they've actually been able to pull it off so well, and it never has like felt clunky at all. I was actually really afraid that this time skip was going to change things way too much, but mostly it was just an aesthetic change, and it actually felt kind of natural the entire show, and I've loved everything about that. This episode had a surprising amount of heart behind it as well. Like I said, it all sort of goes with the themes of the power of forgiveness. In fact, I think one of the most powerful scenes of the entire episode was when Soya was hanging out on top of his house looking up at the stars, and he's joined by Ginkgo. This is the scene that really taps into the whole forgiveness theme of the entire series, where Soya is wondering why she's not vindictive towards him at all and doesn't want to get revenge, and that's because the people of her race actually evolved from the power of love. They're willing to forgive anyone and anything for anything that they've actually done before. This is a stand-up moment for her character, and it goes in line with what Soya is going to have to do in this battle. He's going to have to get rid of all of his hatred and just damnation for this giant dragon. He's going to have to forgive this thing in order to save practically the entire universe. On top of that, I love the fact that this scene established that Ginkgo and Soya are essentially kind of like surrogate families for one another, and even though Soya lost his brother, he's now gained a loving sister. It's such a great moment, and I have to say, I love Ginkgo's design here. It's a little different than before. She's a little taller, but I think she looks absolutely adorable with her hair down, and she's without a doubt probably my favorite female character from the series. The themes, the emotion, the characterization of this episode was on point, but the action and the visuals were certainly top-notch too. This is such an amazing looking show, and memorable and unique, whether it be just Generalissimo and Sensei's actual race, which consists of all sorts of weirdos, cyclopses, and talking owls, but we also just have the image of them flying through space with that giant golden cat, the giant robots, the battle with the dragon on the moon. Everything is just so distinctive, and again, I think one of the biggest things about this series has got to be its amazing sound design. Every single time something moves or there's an explosion or an attack, it just has so much oomph behind it. The scene of the dragon actually like flying from the moon, there's so much weight and massive scale behind it. You believe that this is a giant world-destroying dragon when it's moving, and a lot of that just has to do with the sounds that it actually makes. It's a small touch, but really, I think it can elevate a series a lot more than some of the standard stuff and stock sound effects that we see from a lot of other anime shows. Planet With is such a brilliant experience, and it really disturbs me to know that not a lot of people are watching this series, or it's not as popular as I think it is. I think it's getting overshadowed by a lot of other shows this season, but I give Planet With one of my absolute highest recommendations for anime series that you must watch at least once. It's got a lot of heart, it's got some amazing characters, it does not waste any time in its storytelling, and it delivers some of the most unique and beautiful action that I've seen from any action anime series. The actual themes themselves are something that I think is a tune that we can all dance to, and it's going to have a story that's always going to be relevant. I love this series, and I loved this episode. I'm giving this episode a 5 out of 5. You need to check it out. If any of you guys watched this episode of Planet With, tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below, and what you hope to see from the rest of the Planet With anime series. Thank you guys for watching this review. Make sure to check out the channel for more awesome anime and manga reviews. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay damn down, baby.